G'day and welcome to Talking Aussie Farming. I'm your host, John Weinstock from FarmCap, and today we're here with Steph Trethewey, Tasmanian Australian of the Year 2024. Very impressive background. Steph, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We've got a lot to get through. You've got a super impressive background, and keen to get to know how you got here today, from a journey from tennis to TV to farming to charitable work, really helping mums all around, well, Australia and the world, probably inspiring through Motherland, which we're very keen to talk through. But I'll get the tough question out of the way. How do I hit a one-handed backhand like Roger Federer?
I wouldn't know, because I had a two-handed backhand, so I can't help you there. Cannot help you there, unfortunately.
My two hands no good either, but do you want to just walk us through your background? A very fascinating journey as to how we got to today.
Yeah, it's not often I get to start at tennis. Usually we sort of start at the TV part, so thank you. But look, growing up, I had a tennis racket in my hand at the age of 5, would play with Dad every weekend, played weekend sport, built up my skills in tennis and became quite good at it. And by the time I was probably 11 or 12, was playing pretty competitively in juniors and nationals around Australia. And by, I think I was about 15 and a half, nearly 16, I went over to Europe to play in some of the ITF world circuit, and got my WTA ranking, and really gave it a good old crack for a couple of years. And look, career high was like 900 in the world, so nothing too, impressive. But, I did play professionally for a couple of years, and I was prone to injury. I had a stress fracture in my back when I was about 17, and dealt with that on and off for a few years. I was in the New South Wales Institute of Sport, which was amazing. But looking back now, I left school at the end of year 10. So I went to King Koppel in Sydney, and then Skeggs Darlinghurst, and end of year 10 had the opportunity to have a scholarship in the New South Wales Institute, and took that. And I remember my parents said to me, you go for gold with your tennis, but you will finish school. That was a non-negotiable. And looking back, I'm thankful for that, because I do know a lot of my tennis peers who didn't make it, who didn't end up, making a living from it long term, and they not finishing school, I think, was really difficult for them. It gave them limited options, and I'm really glad that my parents pushed for that. So I taught myself by distance education, finished year 11 and 12, and my HSC really had to be self-disciplined in studying and doing that in between training. And the institute was amazing, but they did push us really hard physically. And I think as a young girl, not long out of puberty, your body is very different to the blokes. And I remember, I was dating one of the boys in the tennis circuit at the time, and we would be literally pushed the same way in the gym. Obviously he could lift heavier than me and things like that, but a lot of the way our bodies were treated was really go hard or go home. And so I don't think that really helped with my injuries. And look, the opportunity came up. I finished school, and I just knew I knew I was bloody good, but it's really the 1%ers we're talking about who really go on to become the Roger Federers of the world. And so I think I was also really realistic. And so I looked at college in the US, and was fortunate enough to be offered a full scholarship to California State University, Long Beach, to play on their tennis team. And I moved over there at 18 and left Australia behind for a year, and had an amazing year over there. I was a freshman of the year. We won our Big West, the big regional championships, the West Coast of America, and had an amazing team made up of 2 Australians, I think 4 Poms, and 1 French girl. It was a real mix, and that was tough, and really, you're there on a full scholarship, so they own you. They're paying, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, in America to go to college. And so you'd be up early for class at university at 8 a.m. I picked journalism. I didn't know what else to do. I loved a good yarn. I grew up watching 60 Minutes. I was really good at English at school, not so good at maths or science. So I just thought I'll just pick journalism. And so, had classes in the day, and sort of lunchtime onwards, we'd do sort of 4 or 5 hours of training, sometimes in the afternoon, hit the gym, and then compete around the States on the weekend. And amazing year, everything I thought it would be, watching American Pie and movies like that. It sort of lived up to that expectation. It really was like that. It's a whole other world over there. But being an athlete, obviously, you know, I did party and give it a good nudge, but very much focused on tennis and my studies. And then, look, to be honest, at the end of the year, I thought, you know, I can't see myself doing 4 years here. I loved it, but, you know, it was time to do the next chapter, which I'd fallen in love with journalism. And I ended up transferring and went to UTS in Sydney to finish my journalism degree. And that sort of began a whole new chapter.
Yeah, wow. What a cool experience living on the set of American Pie for a year, and just, you know, playing professional sport and having it, you know, giving it all you've got. You know, a lot of life skills learnt, you know, competing and training at elite level and realising how hard it is to win prize money and make a living.
It's so hard.
You know, insanely competitive as you get up the chain. Fitness skills. And budget, I'm guessing, requires a whole team around you, you know, physio, medical, and skill-wise. But to give it a crack, you know, it's bizarre that sport relies on prize money to survive.
Yeah, it's hard. And, you know, when you're a young teenager and your parents, you know, I come from a middle class, you know, I'm an only child. My parents put every penny into sending me to a good school. So I didn't want for anything, but, you know, we didn't have, you know, endless money to spend. So, you know, that felt like a lot of pressure as well. And traveling in Europe, there was 3 of us who were 16 and Tennis New South Wales sent over a coach with us, but we were pretty much on our own. But look, I wouldn't be where I am today without tennis. I think, you know, it's nice to reflect. I mean, I spend so much time interviewing other people, but everything that I've done and you know, where I am today, I wouldn't be here without tennis and I wouldn't be here without a lot of things that have happened since, but that's given me the discipline, the drive, I guess, independence, the resilience, but also like even physically, you know, I look at motherhood and how I recovered even from my 2 births. That's, you know, that's what my husband calls my post A grade body, which, you know, years later has that muscle memory and that strength that I can, you know, when I do hit the gym now, which I recently, you know, started doing again, has kind of, you know, enabled me to build that strength as well and helps me as a mum too. So yeah, it's all connected.
No, that's great. And I guess the experiences feeling isolated as well, I'm sure translates to what you're doing today. And then let's go through your TV journey. So I guess you learnt a lot. Did you have some exposure to rural and regional journalism along that journey as well? And that probably opened doors to life on the farm. Yeah,
a little bit. So I started off, I was still at uni when I started working in TV. I worked at Channel 7 as the Sky News liaison, and that was, you know, a lot of overnight shifts. I then progressed to 9 News in Sydney. I was assistant chief of staff, working a couple of days a week at 9 in Sydney after uni and in between 2 other jobs at trying to just save up and pay my way. And that was a huge learning curve. And, you know, 9 at the time owned NBN in Newcastle, and I had the opportunity to get my first job as a reporter. Previously, I was, as I said, assistant chief of staff. I also worked as a producer for the Today Show doing the graveyard shift, which was started work at 1 a.m. and finished at 10 a.m. And then would, you know, often go to uni that day as well. So looking back now, I'm like, I could not do that. And I've had 2 newborns and been up all night, and I could not imagine doing what I did in TV back then. But
I don't think Carl's complaining.
No. No, I don't know how he's done it for decades. But got my first reporting job for NBN in Newcastle, which was, you know, I love Newcastle, and I loved that team there, and really cut my teeth just having a go as a young regional journo. Had no idea what I was doing. It's funny, I look back at uni, and no disrespect to universities, I think the world's changing a lot though. I'd say I learnt 20% of what I needed to know about journalism from university. The rest came from working and doing it and getting internships. And and I'm really apologise to anyone who works at that university or has other opinions. But for me personally, I look back and, you know, it was a good couple of years to study. It was definitely worth it. But, you know, for me, I did all my learning on the ground and getting into the real world, because uni is not the real world. The best MBA is losing money. That's the best way to learn.
it's 4 years of study than having a crack at a business and learning. I've done a few MBAs in my time.
Yeah, and there's only so much that a book and a spreadsheet can teach you, and it is valuable for some paths in life, but for me, yeah, journalism and getting to know people and stories and having a nose for news. I mean, you learn by doing and watching others do in the field. So, yeah, I was in Newcastle for, I don't know, a year and a bit, and then got offered a job for Channel 7 up in Rockhampton as bureau chief, managing Central Queensland, so managing Rockhampton and Gladstone and the news around the region for 7 Local News. And that was my first lesson in isolation, because growing up in Sydney, I did live in California for a year, a long way from home, but I was an hour away from LA. Long Beach was thriving, so I never felt lonely. It was busy. Rockhampton was different. I'm not sure why. I think I was just so immersed in my job and had a lot of pressure as a young journo, managing the bulletin. So I was reporting, but my job was also to fill the bulletin every night. And I struggled like for that year and a half I was there. I did my job. I was great at my job. I learnt so much, but yeah, I found that quite lonely. And it was my first taste of regional news, Rocky being the beef capital. I learnt a lot about agriculture. The late Graham Acton he had his office above 7 Local News there, and I'd often go up there and have a yarn with him and be like, Graham, I need a story today. It's a slow news day. And we'd find something. He'd give me a couple of quotes. I'd whip the camera out with my cameraman and he'd help me piece together some sort of story about beef prices or whatever. So I met some great people in agriculture, and it was lonely and I struggled a bit, but I really loved the feel of a regional area. I loved that people knew each other. There was that sense of community. I built great relationships with other journos. We'd all go to the same pub. There was only kind of one main one that we'd go to on a Friday night. And it was a great time there. And I suppose Rocky is where the Motherland story begins, because it's where I met my future husband, my farmer, and I wouldn't be where I am today without Rockhampton.
I've actually got a cool little story about Rockhampton where I had a job in the year 2000 working on Great Keppel Island as a sport and rec leader for a summer when the island was thriving. And while it was fun, it was also felt quite isolated. I got a bit bored at times. I actually asked my friend back in Melbourne to send me a textbook, for a finance textbook, to keep my mind occupied, believe it or not. But you had to get off the island and go to the mainland to Rocky to feel some sense of normality. So for me, Rocky was the place to go to. That was the big smoke, to get off the island and then go back to Yeppoon and back on the boat, back to work. So it was a very brief experience in my 20s. I guess I studied sports science before I got into business and stuff. So that's where Rocky got started for me. And then I was back in Yeppoon again recently, and it's just amazing to see how that that little town, which was not much there 25 years ago, is now thriving. And I guess we travel to Rockhampton all the time visiting farmers, and Beef Week's coming up next year again, so I'll probably be back there for that. That'd be a big reporting day. You get plenty of content if you're a reporter up there.
Yeah, I missed Beef Week when I was there, because obviously it's only every 3 years. So unfortunately, I was never there when it was on, which was a shame, because my sort of 2 years fell outside of it. But yeah, look, I'm so grateful for Rocky, because it was on a very slow news day that I met my husband. I didn't know what to do story-wise. There were no politicians in town, no major crimes committed, nothing was happening. And I was like, oh God. And there was this sort of ag event on, and I was going to send the junior reporter, Tom at the time, who just started with us. And I was like, oh, I'll go, because I can just whip something up. Like, I'll just manage it. And I've got some more contacts in that space and whatever. And so I went along, and the usual suspects were there. And I said, oh, I need a yarn, and who should I talk to? And they're like, oh, that young bloke over there, Sam Trethewey, he's our guest speaker. We've flown him up for this event. And so, I interviewed my now husband for the 6 o'clock news. So I got a cracking day, very productive day, got a story and got a boyfriend. So, that day changed my life.
Wow, amazing. And then how did you end up on farm in Tassie from working in Rockhampton?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I met Sam, he's a third generation Tassie farmer, but his dad had moved to Victoria to farm. His parents had divorced and left Tassie, long story. So he wasn't living in Tassie. He was living on his dad's farm. And when I met him in Rocky, he then spent the next several months working on farms around Australia, and had plans to work in agribusiness and ag tech and agri-politics. And so when I met him, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. It's not like I fell in love with a farmer who was on a family farm full time and I was going to spend time on that farm. You know, he really was beautiful and followed me to Brisbane. So I got my big break with A Current Affair as a reporter in Brizzy. So Sam helped me move from Rockhampton to Brizzy, and he moved into my apartment and never left. And we've been inseparable since then. But yeah, he was in Brizzy. So he actually did his MBA at Bond University while I was working with A Current Affair, and he was working a bit with the NFF and doing bits and bobs on the side of his MBA. And, you know, so really I didn't know what farming, falling in love with a farmer meant then, because for me, my farmer was wearing, you know, MJ Bale shirts and clean RM. So, yeah, I had no idea. And so we spent the next couple of years in Brisbane. I then got a big break as Deputy Bureau Chief of A Current Affair in Victoria, reporting and supporting the Bureau Chief there. And Sam got his big break working for Findex as head of agribusiness and also co-founding Sproutex. So Sam and his co-worker Andrew Lai set up Sproutex, which is Australia's first ag tech accelerator program, which was backed by a venture capital fund. So that was huge for Sam. And so he was right into that, still working in agribusiness and agriculture, but just not, you know, not with mud on his boots, just in a different way. And so I was working for Channel 9. I then moved to Channel 7 and worked for Sunday Night for a while. And long story short, we were thinking about starting a family. We were newly engaged. By that stage, I had actually moved across. I was working at Findex as well as their head of comms. And, you know, I think we could see that if we stayed in Melbourne much longer, we'd have the life sucked out of us. It was just not, it was not us. It was not Sam. You know, agriculture's in his blood and entrepreneurship's in his blood. He'd spent all this time helping other entrepreneurs build up their startups and investing in them. And he was like, I think it's my turn to have a crack of something of my own. And I was just, you know, in a love bubble with Sam. I was done with TV. You know, I was done. You know, there's nothing in TV that I wish I'd done more of. Like, I think I was done. And I look at TV now and I think I'm lucky that I got to experience it in the way it was back then, which wasn't that long ago. But you look at what's happening now and budget cuts and just the nature of news, clickbait. It's just so different and so not the world I want to be in anymore. So I was done with that, and we fell pregnant. And Sam said, you know, how would you feel about us moving to Tassie and starting our own farm? And I was like, yes, obviously. I've watched Farmer Wants a Wife and Gourmet Farmer. This sounds amazing. That's literally the only preparation I did before moving to the farm. So I was all in.
That's good. You probably got
you
get some tips from Samantha from Channel 7 who hosted a season, didn't she? Yeah.
Not remotely helpful, any of that. I'll give you the hot tip. But yeah, so I gave birth to our little boy in January 2019, and motherhood hit me like a ton of bricks. It hit both of us, parenthood. It was really hard. Being ambitious, career-driven, independent, it was a real shock. I wasn't prepared for that. And so I was already struggling, but I just got on with it because, you know, society tells you that motherhood is the greatest gift of all, you know, #blessed, #grateful. So how dare you be depressed? So I just sort of put up and I shut up and got on with it. And I guess that year, Elliot was 6 months old. Sam and I had managed to raise capital for our farm. You know, we had nothing. We literally started with some bulls, and Sam's dad helped us with that. And we had to raise capital from an investor for the OpCo and the PropCo and to get a start. So we started with nothing, which I think is really important to say, because I think people look at what you build and they maybe assume that you were given a family farm, which is also hard in its own way, but at least you have an asset to sort of go into and start from, whereas we didn't have anything. So Sam in particular worked so bloody hard, you know, outside of work hours to raise that money and to get us at that start. And so, yeah, Elliot was 6 months old. We packed our 2 blue heelers, his ute, my little Honda Jazz, and we hopped on the Spirit of Tasmania ship, and we made the overnight journey to central North Tassie and arrived on our farm. And overnight, my world totally changed again. So that's sort of where the next chapter begins.
Yeah, wow. Haven't been on the Spirit of Tassie for a while. I think it's still going back and forward, but
I don't recommend having any wine if it's like a really rough night. I remember I had like a glass of red, and I don't drink much at all, but I had a glass or 2 of red, and it just made it worse because it was a bit rocky and rough. And so, yeah, don't recommend.
No, okay. Well, and yeah, the move from city corporate to on farm, and now with young children, for someone who's driven with the entrepreneurial flame that both of you guys do, to all of a sudden having that full-time commitment changing would have been incredibly challenging. And I guess which might have led you to being inspired to create some help, I guess. What was the feeling like that inspired you to get involved with helping rural mums?
Yeah. Look, I'll be honest, I've come a long way in 7 years since becoming a mum, but, back then I just remember being so alone and feeling so isolated and not realizing that Sam would be working 7 days a week, which is like so obvious now, but like, I thought he'd be home all the time. I thought we'd have dates on hay bales and, all the stuff you see on the shows. I didn't know how relentless farming was, and parenthood is relentless too. So it's like the perfect storm for a lot of couples. And so Sam was out there working his guts out, like just working so hard. I was working hard too at home. I was trying to help Sam a little bit with the business and marketing, but really those first few months I was in mum mode, and I had this little baby, and my mental health really took a dive. I just felt so alone. I felt I was in a really dark place, and I had no village, no access to a mother's group, no family, no friends. I knew no one. I couldn't walk up the road to grab a coffee like I could in Melbourne. Like, for me, it was like dropping me in the middle of the Sahara Desert, which is hilarious because now I don't feel isolated at all in Tassie. Like, Tassie's so small and you're always close to a town. It's not like some of the bigger states. But at that time, given the world I'd come from, it was hard. And I had this moment, I was really struggling. Sam would leave for work in the morning and I'd kiss him and, smile, and he'd go off and I'd just cry. Like, the front door would close and I'd just cry because I just thought he was so lucky to be free while I was sort of feeling so stuck and alone with the baby. And I got very angry. Everyone's heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to raise a child. And I just thought, well, if it takes a village to raise a child, where the hell is mine? That's literally what I thought. And that was the moment when Motherland was born. I've been asked so many times, how did you come up with the idea? And I don't have a clear-cut answer. It was out of desperation and innovation, I suppose, thinking on the fly. It wasn't strategic. I didn't sit down to a business plan. I just thought, I need help, and I can't be the only rural mum that needs help. I'm a journalist and I'm a rural mum. So what can I do with those 2 skill sets, being isolated, to create change? And so 2019 podcasting was very, it was flourishing, but not like it is now. Like, everyone's got a podcast now, whereas back then it was still, 6.5 years ago, it was still just kind of climbing. And so that's, where the podcast was born. I came up with the word Motherland, just popped in my mind, really. I created the logo using an online logo creator for $150, which is still the logo we have today. And got started with telling stories. So it started very humbly from my kitchen table on the farm, between naps, sometimes breastfeeding while, doing interviews, and took on a life of its own very quickly, and has obviously grown into much more than a podcast since then.
Yeah, well, it's phenomenal. And I'm keen to learn about the growth that you've seen. So from your first 1 or 2 rural mums in your region that you're probably connected with, to now, I think you've recorded hundreds of episodes and over 1 million downloads, and won awards left. And talk about media. I mean, this is the new media, and you've created your own platform, which is reaching a very targeted audience and having a real impact. Especially just coming off Mother's Day, it looks like you've run some events, and it's inspired a nation of rural mums feeling the same pressure. I mean, it's hard enough in central Melbourne, suburban Melbourne, to find the right mothers group. let alone feeling isolated. But I guess somewhat of a perfect storm, I guess, pre-COVID starting, and then all of a sudden everyone's online and the isolation would have kicked in even worse. I mean, we're on farm, a couple of times a month. We were flew back from Mildura yesterday and saw a couple of farmers in the Mallee, and just the level of connection you can feel they're screaming out for. It was like, you guys are coming back, aren't you? When are you coming back to visit us again? Just, love the conversation. Some farmers love the fact that cows don't talk back, mind you. So that actually appeals to some farmers, but you could just sense that sitting around the table and listening and asking and connecting for men and women, but, more so for women with young children on their own, for many hours of the day must be incredibly challenging and stressful. So yeah, talk us through, how you've reached so many people and what impact it's had.
Yeah, I mean, I just recorded our 300th episode the other day, and it's over 1.3 million downloads, and very surreal. I remember thinking, I don't care if 10 people listen or 10,000. It was never about the numbers. It was a side hustle. It was something that there was a gap in the market. I'm entrepreneurial like my husband, and noticed the opportunity and saw the gap and thought this is important, and I want to fill it. So yeah, the podcast just took on a life of its own, grew and grew, and I've built. I've used my journalistic skills, of course. I think some people, again, it's a tricky space, podcasting, because anyone can have one. But I do pride myself on the fact that I've been a journalist for over 15 years, and I've acquired certain skills and been around so many different situations and people that, I make people feel comfortable, and that is a privilege, and also a skill that I love having, because people trust me. These women trust me, and I build genuine, authentic rapport with them. And I think that's what comes through the interviews. People share things that they've never shared before. And to my surprise and, joy, we launched Fatherland last year, and I wasn't sure how I would go chatting with men. And it actually went better than I could ever have imagined. Again, creating that safe place, because I think it's equally, if not more important, for the men to start talking, and we can talk more about that later. But, to answer your question, the podcast was thriving. COVID hit, as you said. I had my second baby in the middle of COVID. The borders were shut. Mum and Dad ended up coming just after she was born, but during my pregnancy was pretty tough. It was a weird time. Although on farm, we were in our bubble anyway. So I remember Sam and I reading the news. We had friends and family in Melbourne, and we felt for them, but we didn't really understand, because for us, life continued as normal. We did have one lockdown in Tassie, but being isolated anyway, we didn't really get into town much anyway. So for us, the weekends were the same. And yeah, we had to go and get a takeaway coffee if we drove 45 minutes to Launceston. But other than that, it was business as usual. So it didn't really impact us mentally. It was more just family not being able to get in. So that was hard. But had my second baby, long story short, fell into a heap again mentally, and ended up getting help for that. But I didn't have access to a mother's group. And, in Melbourne, when I had Elliot, my firstborn, I was automatically allocated to one. It's something that's very common in the cities and big regions. When your baby's like 8 weeks old, you get automatically allocated one, and you build those connections. And I sort of thought, I can't be the only rural mum that doesn't have access to a mother's group. Again, just using logic and sort of lean startup methodology. I just did a really quick survey of rural mums. I think it was about 300 responded, and over 50% said that they didn't have access to a mother's group due to either geographical location, being isolated, or just crappy local services. And even ones that did have access, we've learnt so much since then, is it was a nice play group, but it was all about the kids, and there wasn't a space for them to really feel safe and open up judgment-free with other rural mums. And living in a rural community, everyone knows your business, which is lovely sometimes, not so lovely other times. So again, that opportunity to create something. So yeah, that's where I created Motherland Village, which is Australia's first online rural mothers group program. It's a boutique six-week online program, and it's all about, I kind of joke, it's like speed dating and online dating on steroids for rural mums. And, these incredible connections that form over the 6 weeks and beyond. And, we've supported over 450 mums through the program since late 2021 and created real change in the mental health space. And, I realized I was onto something. I think people think of a mother's group and motherhood as babies, the baby years. as being the hardest, which it can be, but our program is very unique nationally, regardless of the rural landscape, because we support women with children age all the way up to 18, because, you know, rural families are dealing with the boarding school years, with the teenage years. They're still geographically isolated. The challenges don't go away when the nappies end. So yeah, the program was the next step. So that was sort of phase 2 of Motherland. And I remember I took the first 90 women through the program myself solo, before I started thinking about how can we grow a more sustainable business model. You know, at the time I was a sole trader. So we've only actually been a charity since July 2022. So it's only just under 4 years. And so that took time to learn, to grow, and be like, right, what's the next evolution for Motherland?
Well, it's some impressive numbers and people you've helped, you know, significantly. What kind of impact have you seen that's helped some of these mums by being able to connect where they otherwise might have faced mental health challenges?
Yeah, so we survey the mums before and after the program, and so 98% of the women who come through the program say that it's improved their mental health if it was an issue before. And, you know, importantly, acting in that prevention space is a big part of what we do. So building a village for women and helping build that social connection and therefore, I guess, resilience and prevention of potential mental health issues. But also, it's not all about mental health in a bad way. It's also about the joy of connection and the good and fun stuff as well. But, you know, we're seeing incredible change. Like, women come through the program and they say, I'm now going to work on myself more. This program has helped me realize that I haven't been looking after myself, and I'm now going to go get that help, or I'm going to talk to my husband, or I'm going to whatever it might be. So, yeah, we really are changing lives through the program. And we had at our recent national conference in Toowoomba, we sold out 5 months out. We had 350 rural mums from every state, you know, as far as the Northern Territory and WA come to Toowoomba. And, you know, of those 350 women, over 100 were Motherland Village alumni. Some of them met their group face to face for the first time because they're matched into groups with women from around the country. And so sitting at tables with their Motherland Village group, meeting for the first time or meeting for the second or third time on a girls' weekend, building lifelong friendships. You know, I can't explain it. You have to be there to feel that magic, but it is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, the champagne must have been flowing, I'm sure. Face-to-face connections. It's quite remarkable, and you know, a happy and healthy mother at home just transcends beyond just the mum, but to the whole family, the kids, and partner and business. So it really is an important touch point just to help maintain that level of health and happiness and productivity in the home. Tell me about the couple of events that you just hosted, the Mother's Day events I saw online.
Yeah, so we host, you know, around 5 events a year. We're about to, by the time this goes to air, perhaps those events would have passed, but, you know, we're heading to Dubbo and Rockhampton in May for Mother's Day. We know we've got 200 women joining us in Rockhampton and close to 200 in Dubbo as well. And, you know, we host them regularly around the country throughout the year. Last year we went to WA, you know, for the first time. We go around the place because that connection is key. And I think that our digital offering is so important, but the face-to-face connection is just as important, even more so in some cases. So for us, it's this holistic offering that Motherland gives women, building that village digitally, physically, connecting them to health services. We've got an online health platform as well. And yeah, it's beautiful. And I think that the world we live in now, it's a funny old world. I think we're going to see, and I think I'm already starting to see it, but I think we're going to see a rapid move and resistance back to more old school ways. I think that people, as much as we're harnessing technology and AI and the digital world, I think that as humans, you know, we're born through connection, and storytelling is such a big part of where we've evolved from. And I think we're seeing this move back by certain people to keeping things simple. You know, nothing can replace physical connection. Nothing can replace sitting in a room face to face with other people, listening to their stories, giving them a hug, seeing them cry, seeing the joy. You can't put a screen and replace that. And yeah, so I'm really excited for what we're building and just the joy and connection that it has brought to thousands of rural women.
That's great. What are you most proud of out of your experience so far with Motherland? What are a few things that you're really proud of?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm proud of all of it. None of it is more important. You know, no part of the charity is more important than the other. If I'm being really honest, I think I used to, again, coming from that tennis, that sport, high achieving background, you know, I was an elite sports person. I was on TV, on national TV. So I think it's been hard in the beginning of growing Motherland to, I guess, come to terms with this new chapter and you know, getting these incredible awards, like, you know, being the National Rural Woman of the Year in 2022. That put Motherland on the map. That was amazing. And then the Australian of the Year award. It's all been amazing. It's all helped the cause. But if I actually think what I'm most proud of, it's none of that shit. I mean, no one cares, honestly. Someone will hear this episode, be like, oh, that's cool, that chick won an award, good on her. And then they're going to go back to their own life and their own problems and their own ego, because we've all got one. So none of that stuff actually really matters. And I think, you know, I lost my mother-in-law to cancer in 2024. And that was a big shift for my husband and I. It really put a lot of things in perspective, and we made a lot of changes in our life. And so to answer your question, like, I think what I'm most proud of is my happiness and my mental health and my stability and my marriage and my motherhood journey. You know, we've been through the ringer, as many farming couples have over the last 7 years. We've both built businesses. We've raised 2 babies. We've loved, we've lost. And I stand by my beautiful husband, and I just am just as in love with him, if not more now than I was 12 years ago when I first interviewed him and fell in love. And so I'm really proud of that, because I think a lot of people talk about the business success, and, you know, I do listen to CEO podcasts and you hear all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but I want to know, like, when that person goes to bed at night, who are they lying next to? Who are they loving? Who loves them? What kind of parent are they? Are they looking after their mental health? Are they actually happy? Because I think there's a lot of bullshit in this space where people, you know, share their successes and their ego, but it's all just crap. And a lot of people are going home and aren't happy and do have problems in their marriage. And so it's not to take away from the business success, but for me, you know, it's looking at the whole picture. You can't have everything at the same time. But I'm most proud of the fact that I have a loving family, a loving marriage, and that whatever I do with work, you know, I'm doing authentically. I'm doing it because it means something. I'm not driven by ego or money. No one sets up a charity if they're, you know, fueled by money. I'll give you that tip. So yeah, I think that's what I'm most proud of is that whole journey.
You should be very proud of what you've achieved, you know, and happy and healthy kids at the end of the day, right? That's what it's about. I agree with your comments there. You never really know what's going on until you look under the hood. But what you've done is you've opened up women to share their vulnerabilities, which is a very courageous thing to do with someone, you know, to build that trust within a group, let alone to share it publicly. I've listened to a few of your episodes, and it's really courageous of some of these women to share what they're going through. And then, you know, the amount of warmth and response, I'm sure, that some of your mums receive once they do open up, you know, really starts them on their journey. So, I mean, that's something to be incredibly proud of. What's the journey now for Motherland and Fatherland? How do you see the charity progressing?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you know, fundraising and financial sustainability is always the number one thing that I'm sure any charity CEO will tell you is the thing that keeps them awake at night. We are really lucky that we have quite a diversified revenue stream. You know, we've supported with advertising through the podcast with corporates usually. We have, you know, one philanthropic partner. We're working with Queensland government. We do rely on just donations. So I'm proud of how I've built that business model to be as sustainable as possible, but it is tricky. Like, times are tough. So I think that, you know, we're only limited. We're not, like, sky's the limit for us. And I think one thing that my team knows is we've grown very quickly in a short amount of time. And I'm the kind of boss that I'll have an idea in the shower, and then the next day we start working on it because I'm like, hey guys, I've had this great idea. Like, what do you think? They're like, great. I'm like, great. And sometimes I'm like, Steph, shut up. Not every idea, you know, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's a big lesson I've learnt in business and life. And so Motherland's grown very quickly, and I've still got many more, I guess, bucket list items for Motherland and Fatherland. But I think it's also just trying to consolidate what we're doing and set us up for the long haul. scaling what we're already doing. We have got big new projects coming, but I think just doing, improving our program, doing more events, there's so much more we can be doing. But I think also being a charity that focuses on well-being, I'd be a hypocrite if I burnt my team into the ground. And, I think 2 years ago, I nearly burnt out. That 2024, that year was tough, and the year we lost my mother-in-law. And, I was really not showing up as the mum I wanted to be, the wife I wanted to be, the CEO I wanted to be. So have made lots of changes because, like, at the end of the day, life is short. And I know it sounds really obvious and we hear people talk about it all the time, but that's something that I remind myself every day, and not to take things too seriously. So the team knows, like, we're going to roll out a big project. Hopefully in the next 6 months, we're working on, we've got a bit of a focus group that's helping us, of mums, help us build it. But, I've said to the team, like, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we had a crack. As in, I'm not scared of things not working, because I do have that perspective of, we don't know when our time's up. So just have a go. Don't take it too seriously. So I'm really proud of that nimbleness in the team, that culture of innovating, trying. If it doesn't work, pivot. So I think we're very unique as a charity, because that's not, necessarily the culture of all charities. So yeah, but as to where from here, I definitely want to roll out another season of Fatherland this year. I'm starting to work behind the scenes on that. That brought me so much joy last year. I do love new shiny things, being an entrepreneur. So being an intrapreneur and being able to create something new within Motherland was really special. And those 8 rural blokes who trusted me, I mean, far out, they were amazing. Those stories, just incredible. So I'm really excited to bring that to our audience again, and connect with more men. I think, the mental health of rural Australia is more important than ever. People are fighting it on all fronts, seasonally, financially, fuel, fertilizer, stuff happening with CGT. Like, there's just so much shit happening.
The resilience is what shines through of what we see helping farmers through all cycles, right?
Yeah, although, I do have, I'll be honest, like, I do have a tough time with the word resilient. I think it's thrown around with farmers a lot. And I used to be that journalist that years ago used to, report on a flood and be like, the resilient community of such and such is going to bounce back, and it's like, they have no choice, right? They just do. And yes, there is resilience, of course, when you're knocked down and you're used to sort of challenges, of course that builds resilience. But, we've got to be mindful that there's only so much people can take. And, I think it's one farmer every 10 days that takes their own life, predominantly men. That is not talked about a lot. It's like farmers are copying it. They're resilient. They'll push through. Well, not everyone does. That's a father that's gone. That's a family that's lost their dad. So yeah, I think we need to take the issue of mental health in the bush way more seriously. And that's something that Motherland is playing a small part in. This is a big beast. But I think, for us, it's getting in early and trying to reach mums before they're at breaking point. Equally, trying to create a platform and a safe place where blokes can listen in their tractor. They don't have to, publicly do anything, but if they can listen to these stories, hopefully that makes them feel less alone. Because, I would say that being vulnerable is actually part of being a bloody good dad. None of this suck it up stoic bullshit. That's not helping anyone. Yeah, so I'm really proud of what we do, and times are tough in rural Australia. Families are hurting, but there is so much joy as well. The joy of raising your kids in a rural area, the joy of all of it. It's a very unique lifestyle, and my husband and I joke that we're not made for city life anymore. We kind of sit somewhere in between. We love the best of both worlds, but there is something so beautiful about having some land and letting your kids run wild and having the space and not having to leave home, like not having to go to a playground. I can't stand playgrounds. I just really struggle. Really struggle. We had to go to like a birthday party for one of the kids the other day, and oh my God, I just don't like them. And that's after, 7 years of, living with so much space. And, we recently downsized. We're on a smaller block, but still having that space. So I do struggle with like the city stuff, which is hilarious. My friends in Sydney just think, what has happened to you? You used to be this stiletto wearing city slicker, and now I love visiting, but, Tassie has my heart. And yeah, I'm proud to do what our charity can in this space, because at the end of the day, you know, my final point in this long rant is everyone should care about the mental health of rural mums and rural dads. Because at the end of the day, you know, over 90% of farms in Australia are family owned and operated. And, you know, these women in particular are the glue. These men are also working so hard and they feed us. And that's just a fact. They keep the wheels turning of this country. So it's everyone's business. And that's why I encourage corporates, whether they're in rural or not rural, to look at investing and supporting, because it's everyone's business. And I don't think we talk enough about that.
You've hit the nail on the head there, and extremely well said. Now, when you get time to come up for air, hopefully occasionally, it sounds like you are actually enjoying life on the land. What do you do for fun? Do you still get a chance to go out and have a hit? Have you got a local tennis club and teach the kids, or, you know, how do you enjoy some spare time?
I did pick up a tennis racket for the first time in 10 years last year, and I actually was surprised myself with how well I played. And it's kind of hard when you've played something at an elite level to then be social. It's a very odd space to be in. So I did, you know, give it a fair old crack for a few sessions and would love to do that again. I mean, what do I do for fun? I think it's a hard question, because I'm not going to lie and pretend that I've got all these hobbies and this is my self-care routine. Not like that at all. My husband and I both struggle with time outside of work. So, you know, for example, we're only just sort of starting to find our feet where most weekends we have off. That is very new for us. You know, we sold the big farm and we downsized, and Sam was running 2 businesses. He runs a meat processing facility up in the north, and that's going so well. And so he's investing, that's his kind of full-time job now. And so, you know, all of a sudden it's not 7 days a week. And so we don't often know what to do with our time. I think we go so hard in the week that weekends we sort of fall into a heap a bit. But again, my perfect weekend is just being at home. You know, the kids run wild. We've, you know, got a beautiful orchard, veggie patch. I usually kill more than I grow, but, you know, I try. I mean, last weekend, Sam, I was like, darling, because he hates the gardening thing. He's like, I hate plants, you know, animals and livestock. I can understand bloody plants. And I was like, can you please help me? Like, I just need you to cut some wood and help get this netting around this big, huge veggie box, because we've, you know, possums and wallabies, and it's just a nightmare. Anyway, like, he's out there, bless him, with his drill, and you can like hear the echo of him going, for fuck's sake, this fucking thing. Like, and I feel so bad. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything again. Can you just help me with this one thing? And he's like, okay. And he's like, bloody, I know. So like, that's, you know, that's part of the just everyday boring stuff. We're just a normal family on our hobby farm, you know, enjoying life together. And I do probably need to get a bit of a hobby, but, you know, I'm still in that growth phase, you know, raising young kids and raising a business. So I'm still in that season. I think, you know, life is all about seasons, and I think you've got to realize what one you're in and then not try and do too much, because again, I don't care whether you're a mum or a dad, a man or a woman, no one can have it all at the same time. You know, like, we talk a lot about this in the female space, is, you know, women can't have it all or not at the same time. And motherhood makes that more complex and makes that argument more profound. However, I don't know a single bloke who is nailing it in their job as like the best CEO ever, the best husband of the year, the best, most present dad who's there for everything, you know, has great hobbies, who sees their mates every week. Like, I don't know a single unicorn dad that is like that either. So women, you know, do have it harder in so many ways due to the pressure, particularly in early motherhood, of course. But I think also realistically, you know, for humans, you're in a season, particularly when you do have kids, no matter their age. So, you know, for me, it's just like trying to take the pressure off and recognize the season I'm in, and enjoy it while it's here, because, you know, everything does change so quickly. That's true. And don't be so hard on yourself. You're doing an incredible job juggling so many things. One last silly tennis question. Pickleball's taken off. You know, for tennis fanatics, like my partner's a tennis fan, and she just can't get her head around this pickleball craze. I've played it a few times. I think it's great. It's social, it's recreational. Are you a fan or not? Oh, I just think it's this cute little sport wrapped up trying to be something that it's not. I don't know. Look, it's cute. I've never played it, never will. I'd rather just get out the tennis racket because that feels more comfortable to me. But look, at the end of the day, if you're out there and you're playing any sport, then good on you, because that's half the battle, is actually getting off your ass and doing something and moving. But yeah, I can't say I can ever see myself playing pickleball. Yeah, I don't have it locally here anyway, so I don't think it's an option. But yeah,
Okay, well, it might be your next Rural Mums Pickleball Challenge, but it's taking over tennis courts in the cities and indoor centres and retirement villages now. Pickleball's a big phenomenon, but you must cringe when you see a professional tennis player, getting paid to promote the sport.
yeah, but look, you got to make a buck. However, you do. You look at those tennis players, and when they've, look at Roger Federer, like, he's going to make a living for the rest of his life just off his own personal brand. So you can't blame them. They plug products and they do what they do, and good on them.
It's good on them, yeah. But at the end of the day, it's nice to see more people playing sport and interacting physically and social. I think that's the big win for pickleball. Steph, thanks so much for being vulnerable and sharing, your history and your business. It's a fantastic philanthropic, I said that wrong, philanthropic, it's a bit tricky, activity, and very passionate, through your own life experience and having a massive impact on rural mums, not only in Tassie, but around Australia. And I'll be following your journey closely and encouraging, companies to get on board and support fantastic charity. FarmCap, we'll see how we can get involved in the next 12 months and support your projects one way or another. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.